Hello EFR 513 students. In this video I'm going to talk about exercise O2, Introduction to Data Frames, right up here. And I'm going to work off the key. So here's the key for the answers. And as the key says, your numbers will actually be different than mine because we're generating random normal data here. So these numbers will not be the same. So don't worry about that. We're just learning about the structure of the data that's coming out of these data. So here's the code, and at the bottom of the key, all the way to the bottom, I've put the code in there. And so here's the complete code. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this code. I'm going to bring it over to my RStudio. So now when you're in RStudio, when you first open RStudio, what you're probably going to see is something that looks like this. Okay, that there won't be data in here, but you won't see the source up here. You'll see the console and the terminal, but you won't see the source. So you got to press this little double button up here to see the source. And you can organize it in different ways as you get going in this point. But what I'd like to do is I'm gonna put this data right in there. That's the code for the assignment. And what we're going to do is just walk through each of these exercises in the data frame. So make sure this can see everything here. Okay. So the first one said, right up here, it said create 3 vectors of 5 random normal numbers, and the code for that is rnorm. Call them data 1, data 2, data 3. So here's what we did. Here was the first one. Data 1 equals rnorm, open paren 5. It's telling us create 5 random normal variables. And we do that for 2 and 3. And then we type the name of each of those to see the output of that. So I'm going to go ahead and block that code and run that. Okay, so our results are right down here. So we see data 1. Here's data 1. Here's data 2. And here's data 3. Okay. And that was the point of that assignment. So it's very easy to create data in R, and the normal distribution is very handy for us. Okay, so that was the first part of this assignment. So then we're going to move on to EXO2. It says now create a data frame out of these vectors. Call it my data. Now, loosely speaking, I'm just calling them vectors because there's rows of numbers. You could call them lists as well. Okay, but what we want is data frame. So to create a data frame, we're going to take those individual lists or vectors and combine them into a data frame. So here's the code data.frame, and then we're going to say data 1, data 2, data 3. We know what those are as we showed them down here, right? So we can go ahead and run that, and that's going to create my data. That's with a capital, and then if I say my data again, I'll be able to get to see the output of that. So here's our data frame, and now data frames are going to be very important for us because when we import large data sets, we'll import them as data frames in for our analysis, and then it'll be basically manipulating those and subsetting them and such into our analysis. So that completes this assignment. Now, exercise O2. But now, if I wanted to see the attribute right up here, there's attributes of my data. If I want to see what the structure of my data frame is, it's going to show me right down here. When I said attributes, my data frame, or my data, I ended up with names, class, and number of rows. The names are the columns. The class, again, that's the data frame, and the number of rows, how many rows were in that. In our data sets, we'll have maybe 50,000 when we get to rows. Now that we have a data frame, we want to do some subsetting of that data frame. And here in number 3, it says now subset my data. Pull out the first column, data 1, as a vector and call it data 1. Okay, so to do that, what I have here is the code for that. I'm going to call it data 1 A equals my data, which is my data frame, and you see the square columns here, the square brackets. Now that's how I'm going to subset with square brackets. So notice when I look at it, think about a data frame, I'm talking about rows and columns. So the first space is for the rows and the second space is for the columns. So I'm not identifying any rows, that's going to imply all the rows. And then I have a 1, which is going to apply the first column. So when I run that, I'll get my first column out. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and type in here data 1A, and when I run that, we'll see it pull here. Here was our first column right here. I guess I can't. This was our first column, and here it is right here. Now what we know in R is that there's going to be a number of different ways to do things in R. And so for example, here I did it a different way. And that's okay, you can do it however you want, just as long as you get the results. So here's the first way up here, my data and square brackets, empty row, comma, first column. Or we could do it this way, $, data 1, which gave me the column name, and from the data frame, my data. So both these are gonna produce the same kind of results, or the same exact results when I run this. So I want to run the first one, give me the results, and then when I run the second one here, gave me the same results. Okay, so that takes care of number 2 or number 3. We'll go on to number 4. So I says now pull out the first row of the my data as a vector and call it row 1. So it's just my data, square brackets 1, comma, empty space right here. And now I'm asking to pull it out as a vector. What it's really going to do is pull it out as a data frame, but I'm loosely calling a vector a row of numbers. So when I run that, I get that first row of numbers right here, that first row. So if we looked up here, this was our first row, and from running that, we get our first row. Okay, so that's how we pull out the first row of our data frame. And that's number 4. So number 5, say finally pull out the data frame from my data, which includes columns data 2 and data 3. Okay, so I'm asking you to do number 5 right here. And the code for that, okay, the first way I did it was my data, and then I used data frame again. And inside I said my data. I left the row empty, but I put columns 2 to 3. And I ran that. So we can run that code right here. And it pull data's 2 and 3, columns 2 and 3. Its attribute is still a data frame. Now, it turns out when I ran that, I could have just subsetted the data frame directly. So, like right here, I'd get the same thing, where I'm not asking for another data frame, because when it does subset, it'll do data frame, but it didn't hurt anything. So if I run this code, I'll get the same results. And if I do an attribute to that, I can still say that it's a data frame. Okay, so once you're done with the assignment, you can upload it to Blackboard in the Dropbox. Now, what it's going to take, this is obviously this is the language has a steep learning curve, and to get going. Now, if all the possibilities in R say was 100%, maybe we're going to use 5%. I'm going to try to very specific to the code that we need for manipulating and using large data sets and data frames uh, in this class. There's more you can learn about R, and I hope you do, but I'm not going to try to make it a language class. With the fact we're just using R, and I'm going to give you the specific codes that we need to complete the class. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to do a lot of other things. And once you get going, really this is an introduction to these data sets. And once you get going, you'll be off coding yourself. In fact, for the project, you'll have to be doing that using your own code. But we're just trying to get started in the code and the data files, and that's the goal. Okay, thank you so much.